latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Officers respond to every single emergency in this city. The brave women and men who sign up to serve and protect this city are committed to keeping us safe.
Except if it's ICE or anything Trump related. That was the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson. You know, when you think about it, across this country, citizens are watching a troubling pattern unfold. In Chicago, a city already strained by violence and political division, you all heard the Dan Proft play, The Stand Down Order, come across the air, while federal agents were surrounded by an angry crowd. Dispatcher who saw it, I want to buy that dispatcher a drink because she tried to give these officers, the commanding officers, a way out, but they still didn't listen. Today we're joined by a good man, former and retired chief of police of Riverside, Thomas Weitzel. Thomas, Chief, welcome back to Chicago. I was going to say Detroit's Morning Answer, Chicago's Morning Answer.
Thank you. Good morning, man.
You know, you have been on fire on Twitter. I've been following you, and I'm sure the metrics are showing it's just how fire you've been. But Chief, you heard the governor. I mean, the mayor of Chicago. You've heard the radio traffic. Chief, for the people that don't know, define what a stand down order means inside a department and what that command signals to the men and women risking their lives out on the street.
Yeah, that really means don't respond. Or in the case in Chicago, not only did they initially told the officers to hold short, which means they held about 2 blocks short of the scene. Yeah. And then you're right, the dispatchers said they wanted to reiterate that. They asked them to clarify that order several times if you listen to the radio tape. And they not only did they hold up short of the scene, they did not respond with the mass amount of officers that they should have. And when they did respond, it was only per the radio traffic to investigate the traffic crash, and they sent an officer initially. So they didn't have officers respond to the attack, to federal law enforcement officers being under physical attack. They held short. I've never, ever in my 37 years had a command officer make a broadcast like that on a police radio, holding the officers back. And, you know, John, they could have responded. The Trust Act and the Sanctuary City Act does not prevent them from assisting policemen that are being physically attacked. And they are police officers. They're just federal police officers.
Yeah, because they become victims at that point of an act by, as we call, society. But you know, Chief, walk us through this, because I understand the Trust Act. I've read it through and through. I know there's a state representative, C.D. Davis-Meyer, who has introduced a bill. I know it's not going to go anywhere, but to relook at the Trust Act and see where we can go to actually make sure something like this doesn't happen. But Chief, here's my question to you. Let's say you're still the chief of police. A call like this comes out. How are you going to direct your troops to respond, especially knowing the constraints of the Trust Act, but the Trust Act having no part, truthfully, in the response of Chicago police officers going? What would you have instructed your troops to do?
Respond. There's no doubt. I would have put directives out at a time that made the Trust Act and the Sanctuary City Act or State Act clear. Now, it isn't clear. It's confusing, but it does clearly state that you can assist other law enforcement officers. And, you know, the state police is doing that at the Broadview facility, right? They're helping. So you can do that. So you have to put that message out early that if the officers are asking for assistance because they're under physical attack or being shot at or whatever the situation is, you will respond. And we'll handle it afterwards. But you have to give street officers and street supervisors the ability to do that on the spot. You can't go on the radio and tell them to find some commander in the police station or somebody sitting on to come up on the air and give you advice on what to do. You got to give the authority to the street sergeants and the street commanders to be able to go to do that. Because remember, John, as you well know, someday you're going to need help too,
Yes.
right? So the minute you don't help other law enforcement agencies, then they're not going to be helping you.
But Chief, I think the term that I hated the most, we take care of our own. Oh, that kind of burned me up. Now, I know, I get it. What he was saying was we take care of Chicago. But, Chief, I'm going to tell you this. I'll never forget. I was a sheriff's deputy. I was in my dream unit. I was in the cops unit. I had become a deputy to get into the cops unit. Now, this is small in comparison, but I think I would have lost my job that day because I would have responded to that because I swore an oath to protect the citizens and those who may be travelers throughout our county. I swore an oath to protect them. Now, I remember there was we had our detective sergeant who was over us, and he wanted us to go and write tickets to parents who were picking up their kids in the pickup line because, that's part of the roadway. And I'm like, no. I said, why would I want to do that? How about I write something up? I go out and I pass it out to each one of the parents in the line, and then we come and do enforcement. No, we're gonna go and you're gonna write tickets. Well, guess what? He gave me a command to attend. I didn't show up because I told him I'm not doing it because I don't think that's fair to the people that we are here to serve. We're the cops unit. Our job and our role is not to be that enforcement ring. We're the education wing of the police department. Well, needless to say, I got kicked out of the unit. I didn't care. I stood on principle. Where is that? How would you have responded if those cops have responded just basically said, you know what? Nope, we're headed there. The way I thought about getting around it was everybody show up to the traffic accident. What say you, Chief?
Yeah, I agree. We're responding to the traffic accident, and we're also responding to federal agents saying they need help. Let's be clear. They were calling for help. And I could not imagine standing down. And I can give you a really good example of just one of my own children who's a police officer. I'm sure you remember, and your listeners, Uvalde, Texas school shooting, right?
Yeah.
So the police officers held up for 7 minutes until they went down the halls. This is all factual. And one of my sons came to me and he said, Dad, if that was me and my sergeant was telling me to hold up and I heard kids being slaughtered down the hall, I'm going. They can fire me. They can discipline me. I'm going. So, patrolman knows when these orders are not lawful or they don't make sense, right?
Yeah.
They knew, the beat officers in Chicago knew they should go, right?
Yes.
But they're being told by the chief of patrol, extremely high position in Chicago. Chief of patrols repeatedly tell them, hold short.
Yep.
And don't respond.
So true. Now, Chief Weitzel, you've said that publicly that politics has become a cancer within law enforcement. How has that shift changed the way decisions are made at command levels? Because for me, this sounded like a political decision, and maybe, just maybe, someone from the fifth floor had a say in this.
Yeah, no doubt, Don. You can bet that the mayor's staff had already met with the superintendent staff and told them about how the response is going to look to come to any ICE-related issue. So they laid down the law and said your officers will not respond to immigration issues, and they will not assist in making arrests, and we will not house prisoners, or whatever. So they knew what they do. And that's politics seeping into law enforcement. It's at the highest level. Because let's face it, almost all police chiefs, superintendents, whatever their title is, they're appointed, right?
Yep.
They're the politicians. They owe their position to the politicians, and that has gotten out of control. Sheriffs don't fall. Sheriffs have a little bit more freedom because they're elected. But if you're appointed to your position, you're worried that you're going to be replaced, right? You make the wrong decision, you're out, somebody else is in.
Now, Chief Weitzel, I know President Trump is looking and has Pam Bondi looking to see if there were any federal statutes that were violated based upon this stand-down order. What's your take on that? Do you think that's the right path to take to try to see if you can jail Mayor Brandon Johnson or someone within the police hierarchy?
I don't think that's the right thing because I don't think that's going to happen. I don't like to put, idle threats out there just for, a political position or publicity. I do think they should look at whether that was the legal and right response, because I'm sure that the Trust Act and the Sanctuary City Act will show them that it wasn't, that they could have responded, and they can make it clear that you can in the future. But I think threatening to put people in jail over that are the wrong way to go. But I do think that they should look at the leadership too. I mean, even internally, the superintendent needs to look at his own staff and say, because I think his staff lied to him, John, when he's getting a news conference and saying that it didn't happen that way, and there's radio tapes and police officers and dispatchers saying you're wrong, then, somebody in your staff is lying because they're afraid of being moved from their position.
When I heard him say that, Chief, I said, wait, are we listening? And then also, from what I was told by people that were Chicago police officers, the memo that came across the, I forget what the in-car computer is called. We called it something. But there was a memo that came out basically also reiterating the stand-down order. When he said that never came out, well, I have people that I know who said that was true. I mean, how could they allow him to go out there and refute things that people saw and heard with their own eyes and ears?
Yeah, you know what happened, in my opinion? The mayor's team told him, you're going to hold a press conference, not us. We're not going to have the mayor do it, and you're going to get our side out, and here's our side. You're going to refute this, and you're going to stick to that line because that's the way that's what City Hall's telling you to do. And he went out there and did that because he's the superintendent, and I think he's a good superintendent.
I do too.
No mistake. I think he's the best department head choice the mayor ever made in all his administration.
Yes.
But somebody's telling him this is what the line is, and this is what you're going to say, and that's not what happened. I mean, it's easy to see that. There's screenshots of the mobile data computers that are in the squads. There's radio. It didn't happen that way. Okay,
right. You
held short and you didn't respond.
Now, Chief Weitzel, as a former chief, how would you confront elected officials who tried to interfere with tactical response decisions that I believe could potentially jeopardize lives?
Yeah, it's gotten so out of hand that you have to push back in some, because leadership, leaders lead. You have plenty of people that can manage the department day to day, but leaders lead. And, your decisions are huge, right? My city once asked me about politics, and I say, listen, good policing is good politics. And I had my village president go, what does that mean? I said, when we're doing our job right, when the police are doing our job right, you look good. Your politicians look good. Stay out of it. Good policing is good politics. Don't try to dictate policy. Now they're trying to dictate response. We've gone too far when they're trying to dictate police response. I would push back on that for sure.
Do you think the current culture of social media outrage creates commanders who they how do I put this? They manage headlines instead of the mission?
Yeah, there isn't a single police officer they don't want to be the next YouTube video for sure, right? And then you have everybody with social media, they can post right away. Like we said earlier, you can have snap pictures of the police dispatch screens. You can have radio tapes. So it's really out there. So they're very aware of, what their decision making is going to be, and when is it going to be out there and criticized. But on the other side too, John, is something that is really is really, really important in law enforcement. And people get mad when they hear me say this is morale. Morale is huge, and if the morale really sinks, you're in big trouble. I mean, you're as a leader, one of your main responsibilities is morale.
That was definitely going to be my next question, because I know a lot of different police officers, and when you look at what the state legislative body has done to policing in this state, I mean, what they've done to the state police, what they do to cities like the city of Chicago, and even the elected officials within the city of Chicago, the no chase order and all these type of things, that affects morale. Correct, Chief Weitzel?
Correct. I just saw, I don't know if you saw this, but the governor of Florida, DeSantis, just did a press release where he criticized the mayor's decisions here in Chicago. And he said, out of the 800 police officers that have come to Florida since the George Floyd murder, they've had hundreds of them from Illinois. And they're coming from Illinois seeking a state that supports policing, police officers, and as a concept of law and order. And he's dead right on that.
Yeah. Chief Weitzel, here's a question. And I think I want to pose it this way. You know, you keep hearing a lot of these cities, places like Chicago, say crime is down. Well, when you've passed bills like the Safety Act, where the crimes that you normally would report, but people are still committing and they're being released and let out, that will show that crime is that crime has dropped, correct? And I'll never forget, I had a domestic battery, literally a domestic battery. When it got to court, it got pled down to a disorderly conduct. So that domestic battery is now a disorderly conduct. And then now when you report back to the FBI, that domestic battery is gone. Now it's just a simple disorderly conduct. As somebody who used to report to the FBI, there are tricks of the trade that you can do to show that crime is lowering, because not only does the mayor, but the city hall also, I mean, the alderman and trustees want to see those numbers fall as they run for re-election. Please explain that process.
Yeah, for sure. They want the crime stats to look low for property values and when they run for election, for sure. But that can work like this. I'll give you an example. Years ago, you would see police departments, especially ones that had malls, report hundreds of retail thefts. Hundreds. Felony retail thefts. They would have 500, 600. Then all of a sudden, one year, there was like 50. And what happened is those municipalities changed, or they made it a local ordinance. And local ordinances aren't reported to what was called the UCR, the Uniform Crime Reporting, to the FBI. So one year you'd see 600 arrests, and then the next year you'd see 60. And what happened is that's how they get around it. They changed they took the state charge and made it, adopted it as a local ordinance. And that happens in other crimes too, like burglaries can become a theft, battery. Yes. And you're right about pleading them down. The average citizen you go to court, and many times the cases are reduced to a crime that is not reportable.
Right. And then so now these elected officials can now say crime is dropping when crime isn't actually dropping. The citizens, and this is what I don't understand, why a J.B. Pritzker, why a Brandon Johnson doesn't pick up the phone to President Trump and say, hey, can we come to the White House and let's have a conversation about what's happening in the city of Chicago, because men and women who are living through the nightmare that is happening in the city of Chicago. Hey, Jackass shows you I think it was now over. Are we over 3,000 people that have been shot? Is that the number? Over 3,000 people that have been shot in the city of Chicago?
It's really, really high. And I don't know the exact number, but you're right about that. CWB Chicago's reported that there's 58 people that have been shot or dead in areas we had the shot spotter.
Yeah. And
they lay there. They've laid there without anybody calling 911. And the mayor got rid of the shot spotter, and there's no replacement for it yet, right? They haven't got any new technology. No. So,
well, it's been 1,589 people total shot, 356 total homicide. I mean, these are war numbers, Chief. Why would the electorate send back people like J.B. Pritzker or Brandon Johnson when they have to live through this?
Yeah, the only reason for that is that they think they're getting something from their politicians. In this case, it'd be the Democrat politician too, that enhances their life. Like maybe, they're getting certain dollars or certain programs, but that's not happening anymore, because what you and me are talking about right now is affecting their lives daily. And many of us making these decisions, you know what? We're not living in their neighborhoods. They're living in their neighborhoods. And somehow, like, the governor and mayor are saying crime is down, everything's fine, we're safe, that's not good enough. Like, you don't live there. The mayor will tell you he lives in Chicago, but the governor doesn't. The mayor lives in Chicago with 150 bodyguards from the Chicago Police Department. So let's be realistic.
So true. And they want to go after our Second Amendment rights. Chief Thomas Weitzel, we have to leave it there. Retired Chief of Police of Riverside, thanks so much for joining us on Chicago's Morning Answer.
Thank you so much, John. Have a great morning.
All right, you too. And you join us on our turnkey.pro asset line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer.
This is Alistair Begg, inviting you to sail with me next September 5th through the 12th, 2026, on the Deeper Faith Norwegian Fjords Cruise. If you've never been to this picturesque part of the world, the sights are magnificent.